let's say in Central Europe, is maybe a little bit different. So we have about almost 50% of forest coverage still. And so that means we have a long tradition on utilization of wood. Anyway, we discovered that we have lost really a lot of handicraft wisdom. Once again, with the same slide like 2 years ago in Tanzania. Because I really love this guy. It's an old guy in 1917 who made really clear that we are starting to lose knowledge. Together with culture, together with experience, and so on and so on. And so that's the background. And if we combine experience, and experience, that's really the important part of it, and knowledge, then it's wisdom at the end. So this handicraft wisdom was transferred from one generation to the next. Mainly there's one generation in between, so it was the grandfather to the grandchild, mainly. We don't have really precise written documents, and especially if you go to Bronze Age, there's nothing written, of course. So we have to have the learning process again. And yeah, as I've told you before, in a lot of circumstances and so on, we have really lost this wisdom, this knowledge, and also the experience. So how can we discover it again? So that's what we started, and I'm working within a network of historical wood utilization. So a lot of different scientific disciplines are working together, and what I present here, this is really working in wood science and experimental archaeology, and it was really wonderful, and it helped a lot. But anyway, there would be another possibility, it's ethnological studies. I don't want to go into detail in this, but it's really very helpful too. So I want to focus on studying wooden stuff, everything. So coming from excavations, from archaeological excavations, and from museums. So it's always a little bit different in the time frame. And I want to present some case studies we have done. So there's one very, very, very nice place in Austria, Hallstatt, maybe you know. We will have a meeting there in May on wood culture at the end. So there's a salt mine, and within the salt mine, every organic matter was kept very, very nicely, so it's preserved in very nice conditions. And there was a stump. It was a stump. Yeah, a stump. But it was preserved very nicely. If you look at details a little bit closer, then you can see that it's possible, it's still possible to see the tool marks very precisely. And so that's the background. And then using the way of experimental archaeology is try to do it in the same way, using the same tools. The tool is known, and more or less. And so, yeah, you can try to do it and produce the same signs, the same marks as we can see on the old one. So Bronze Age means in this case about 1,300 before Christ. So we started to do the felling of trees, which just takes less than 10 minutes, so it's really fast. You can see some steps, start on one side, go to the next side, and as long as it cracks down. And if you have a look at the tool signatures at the end, it looks really similar to the Bronze Age signatures we have. So it was really successful. What have we done? We use an axe, a bronze axe, and the strokes were done almost vertically. Almost. Not really, but almost. So there were no horizontal ones, because if you look on historical descriptions, which you can find in books, then it looks completely different. So this was in the 19th century, more than 2,000 years later. So it's completely different. So the way of felling a tree was really different in the Bronze Age than later on. Still keeping in Bronze Age, still keeping in Hallstatt, we finished the dating just 2 days ago. It's 1249 before Christ. This staircase, this construction. And for this staircase, you need a groove. How to produce it? Okay, we know the tools. We can try to do it, and that's what we did. And if you compare the original finding, which you can see on the left, you can see some, we try to find it here. Yeah, you can see here some scars, some signs from the tools, and more or less the same, more or less, not really completely, at the reconstruction. So it is necessary to do it in an angle of about 45 degrees. Otherwise, it's not possible to remove all the chips out of the groove. The interesting thing is, I'm doing a lot of dating in Austria. I had to date a wooden building. It's close to Vienna, east of Vienna, and it was dated to 1502 AD. So there's almost 3,000 years in between, and you can still find the same signs. So there's 3,000 years, the same technique of producing the groove. Of course, the tool has changed a little bit. It's iron and so on, but it was still the same procedure. I've presented this also in Dar es Salaam because it's very interesting. It's producing baskets, so that's the really young one, beginning of 20th century still. Baskets made of ash pans, so there's really chips, just a single ring of ash. And we have found also in Hallstatt again in the Iron Age, so this means something like 600 before Christ. Some very nice small things like this. There was something like cheese inside, and this was also a single ash pan which was used. And it was possible to find out the way how to produce it because nobody knows it anymore. We found a very old man who was still doing this, the special treatment of the ash. It's just hammering. It's the same what some tribes in northern US were doing or still doing, interestingly, because they never met, to use these ash pans for baskets mainly. And we had also this very nice wooden box. Another topic, and now I move a little bit more to medieval and pre-modern times, is how to produce, how to utilize boards. Because boards are not so common, because if you look on roof constructions, and we'll do it later, so the board axe was used, and you will not produce boards with the board axe. It doesn't make sense. So it has to be more or less a sawing procedure at the end. But how was it done? And how can we get some information from old boards, from old wooden stuff? So we went to the museum. It's the Austrian Open Air Museum in Stübingen, close to Graz. And you can see here the building, a very nice building. It's a granary. It's just to keep the grain there. And if you look in detail on the outermost side, then you can find some traces which are not that easy to see here on the outside. But if you look a very long time, then you can see everything. It depends also a little bit on alcohol. No, anyway, you can see it. These are traces from hewing. So hewing with the board axe. So that means the outermost side was produced, the surface was produced by hewing. If you move inside the building, then you can see just at the knots here, it's possible to see that there are traces of a saw. I'm not sure if this was done manually or with a water power driven or I don't know. I'm not sure on this. But anyway, you can see also a little bit of planning afterwards. So that makes a little bit more smoother the surface. So that's the fact what we have. So what does it mean? So we start with a log, with a round log. We use the board axe, for example this one, to produce the squared timber. And afterwards, the squared timber was sawn into two pieces. So that means you have doubled the outcome. And in this case, it was also planned afterwards when it was dried, because then the knot shrinks more than the usual wood. That's the reason why the saw marks are still there. So that was one way of utilizing, not boards, quite thick boards, but it's a little bit different. I'm dendrochronologist and I'm doing a lot of dating, and I don't want to go in detail on this, but what dendrochronologists are doing is give 3 rings a date, a calendar date. And if this ring, this outermost ring, was really the outermost one with the bark on it, then this date means it was the time of the felling of the trees. So that's very important for us. So that's the background of what I'm presenting now. We had a look at several hundreds of cupboards, of staves, of barrels, and so on and so on. Really quite a huge amount. And we studied, for example, how the boards were produced, how they look like. So nowadays you can usually find just the trash like the boards see here. That's what our saw industry is producing at the moment. And it's very hard to get the E-board, which is the best one, of course. What does it mean? If you have the there's almost no loss of the outermost wood necessarily. That means also that you will keep the wood with the highest quality, because the highest quality is the outermost part, not the innermost part. So nowadays we use a lot of innermost part and chip the outermost part for pulping. Okay, if we have a look on these cupboards again, and we do a lot of dating of different cupboards, of course, but also on different parts of the cupboards. And you can see here some successful dating, and this was a very important part of us for our work here, because this cupboard is painted and there's a date written, which you maybe can recognize. So it's written here 1819. Anyway, we know that it could be wrong, because it could be the marriage of the daughter or whatever. But in this case, we had a dating of the outermost ring without the ring edge, so we don't have the failing date, of 1814. So you can see that's really very, very close. So what does it mean? We have 5 rings, that means 5 years difference between 1814, our outermost ring, and the given date, the painted date. If you have a look on the 3 rings, and if you extrapolate to the future, you can see that this is just 6.6 millimeters of wood, which was lost due to these 5 rings. So it's very low amount of wood. And this low amount of wood is really the planning, because it was planned. There was no rainy edge. It was planned. And it's also the time of seasoning, of drying. And a lot of people say you have to dry your boards 20 years at least, which is completely wrong. I was always sure on this, but now I'm really sure. If you look at the backboards, then you are often really very close to the outermost ring, so the rainy edge, the bark ring, because you still can find the trapezoidal shape. So it's not a rectangular shape like nowadays, like modern boards. And so there's really almost no loss of wood. So that means if we put all this information together, we have very little loss of wood to the planning, and we have the time of decision, what I mentioned before. So this couldn't be 20 years. That's what other books are more or less proposing is 1 year, 1 single year per centimeter of thickness of the board. And this could fit quite perfect to this case here. So the boards are usually 2.5, 3 centimeters in thickness. So this means 2 to 3 years of drying, and then we have 1, 2, 3 years of loss due to planning of the board. Okay, jump to roof constructions like this. Could be huge ones. Very often, almost in all cases, you can find some marks. These are marks for more or less number one marks. So these were the handicrafts using to give a special number to this piece, because the piece was sawn, was hewed on the ground floor, was sawn on the ground floor. All the techniques using for binding and so on was done on the floor, not up on the roof. Was done on the floor, and then put it on the roof, and then you know, because of the number, where the piece should go. And you can see there are some artistic signs, really very nice. And in some cases, we have special signs, not special signs, but in this meaning special. Because if you look here, it's very easy to see. You have this very little, tiny signs. This is really the counting itself of the number of the piece. But you can see here, the sign starts here and moves on here. What does it mean? The crack appeared afterwards. So that means the sign was given when the wood was still fresh. This is completely logic, because if you ever tried to hew a log to a squared timber, then you have to do it in a fresh condition, a wet condition. Otherwise it will not work. But anyway, I also had a lot of optimism on this, and we have to try and wait still once again 20 years. It doesn't. It's not right. So the roof construction was set up under fresh conditions. So I can conclude. So there's a lot of knowledge which we have lost. What I've told you at the beginning, and there's a lot of knowledge what people think they have nowadays, which is sometimes really wrong. And so it is possible to rediscover if we have lost at least the knowledge, maybe not the wisdom, because the experience is still missing, so we have to learn a lot, and especially if you do experimental archaeology, you have to be a handicraft at the end, because you have to have some skills on this. Anyway, at least some knowledge is possible to rediscover, and experimental archaeology, what I've told you, and wood science can help to rediscover. But, and there's a really big but, because we try to do here a big job, or start also a discussion with the Wood Culture Society here, is we have to do really perfect documentations on this wisdom. We don't have it. We have really rarely published books, and then you can see some text marks, not more. So film is one very good possibility which you can use. The films what we have up to now are not able to do this documentation, because that's not enough in detail. So that's what I really try to do, and try to safeguard this wisdom again. Maybe it's still, once again, just the knowledge, not the wisdom, because experience is missing. So I hope we can go on this and really can safeguard some of this. Thank you.